The Ewoks' presence in Return of the Jedi is one of the two most controversial aspects of the movie, the other being the revelation of Princess Leia becoming Luke's sister. Although some people have considered the Ewoks to be one of the worst creative decisions of the original Star Wars trilogy on account of their silliness, these little furballs have generated a decent fanbase of their own regardless. They have been, and are still, popular with kids, and adults like myself still enjoy the Ewoks on screen, if only just for the comedy value they provide. Now sure, their scenes could have been better. They massacred the armoured stormtroopers too easily, even though I find those moments funny. And for me, the sore weak spot of the Endor battle scenes is that Han Solo and Princess Leia don't do much in these scenes. A lot of the fighting is left to the Ewoks. Actually, I say that the significant lack of character development for them throughout the story is the biggest creative weakness of Return of the Jedi. A lot more could have been done for Han and Leia's characters, but I'll save my thoughts for another video. But people who don't like the Ewoks usually suggest that their scenes would have been better if they were replaced by a tribe of Wookiees or any creatures that look less kiddie. Indeed, the word Ewok was twisted from the word Wookiee, and the Ewoks were originally conceived to be present alongside a tribe of taller creatures. One reason cited by the filmmakers for removing these taller creatures is because the size differences between them wouldn't work visually on screen together. In hindsight, that sounds kinda silly, being that the Ewoks are shown with other tall characters and tall robots in the finished film. Then again, the removal of taller creatures made the main human characters stand out visually in some scenes, and the absence of a Wookiee tribe made Chewbacca stand out visually in his moments. At the same time, because Star Wars is always a family movie franchise for viewers of all ages to begin with, the Ewoks serve their narrative function for appealing to the kids in the audience. In conjunction with their scenes, we have the more adult-orientated scenes to do with the Rebel fleet assault on the Death Star, and the incredibly dramatic and dark moments featuring the Emperor, which are appealing for older viewers. In fact, those scenes are largely humorless, while the Ewoks provide the humour, and that's perfectly fine. This all gives the final act of the movie strong emotional variety. The Emperor's scenes having the moody, dark and serious dramatic tones, the Ewoks providing the kiddie comedy, and the Rebel assault on the Death Star provides the exhilarating, action-packed thrill ride. Brilliant combination. And it's great that the Ewok scenes help the movie achieve that without being too emotionally jarring. The Ewoks may provide for comedy on screen, but their scenes also involve a sense of danger too. And part of that is arguably because of their small sizes, which make them very vulnerable. We get to see a few of them killed, with the tragedy of this Ewok's death being highlighted. And note that as it dies, it lets out a cry that sounds exactly like a baby crying. Is this a young Ewok that is killed here, or is it symbolically a kid being killed here? Either way, it's a pretty dark thing to present in a family film. However, the fact that this is not a human child and we don't see bloody injuries on the Ewok doesn't distress us too much. The message of child suffering in warfare, true to human history, is felt here. Well, at least that's the impression that scene gives me. In fact, this kind of presentation of the violence here is consistent with the original Star Wars trilogy's depiction of violence generally. We are shown violence that on a conceptual level is painful and brutal, but it's also presented in a way that doesn't look offensive on screen for family audiences. All of this is something that taller, adult-like creatures wouldn't be able to provide in the Ewoks' place, because those kinds of creatures would be more physically formidable, and thus less physically vulnerable. It probably would have dampened a sense of tension. Having said that, I think the whole Endor battle scene should have showed more Ewoks and rebels dying to add further tension. Those of you who hate the Ewoks would appreciate the idea. However, something else that the detractors of the Ewoks tend to ignore or not be aware of, and this is more important, are what these characters symbolise in a story. The most obvious and discussed aspect of these characters is that they symbolically represent the force of nature, if you will, battling against and defeating the high-tech supremacy of the Empire, as well as the parallels with the Vietnam War. George Lucas did say that in his interviews. Star Wars is renowned for its symbolic parallels with human history, the Empire representing historical regimes such as the Nazis. But there is more to the Ewoks, and I got one small theory on the Ewoks which I think is pretty cool, and this is something that I haven't ever come across in critical reviews or online discussions of this movie. And that is, in the same way that the Ewoks symbolise the Viet Cong during the Vietnam War, I would say that the Ewoks with their small, cuddly sizes and baby-like dialect metaphorically represent child soldiers, who historically fought in wars, fighting, suffering and dying. The Vietnam War itself was a historical example featuring child soldiers. A few of the Ewoks are even shown brandishing laser guns. I don't know if they stole this from stormtroopers or the rebels, but either way they are using guns. Now, I know, we do see baby Ewoks among them, and some of the Ewoks have visual traits of older bearded adults. But many other family movies and TV shows do feature adult characters having overt mannerisms and personal traits of young kids and school kids. It's actually a lot more common than you would realise. In a lot of examples, adult characters having childish features are meant for additional appeal for the kids so that they can identify and relate to these characters, while the more mature and adult qualities in these same characters still appeal to adults too. So it all fits in with the family movie package. This really spans across film history, and it varies from the obvious, such as Laurel and Hardy, to the very subtle. Remember B.A. Baracus from the A-Team? Big and tough mother with a beard. And yet he is terrified of flying on planes, a fear that is shared by some young kids. I used to have fear of flying, actually. But getting back to Star Wars, the same principle is true with Luke Skywalker. He was played by an adult, but he has a lot of the mannerisms of a young kid or a young teenager. And I say it's true as well with the Ewoks. I haven't come across any statements made by the filmmakers about whether the Ewoks symbolise child soldiers, but it's a simple fact that this Ewok's death is accompanied with a screech of a crying baby. And the Ewoks were always meant to appeal to the kids. So yeah, I do say that the Ewoks play their role as symbolic child soldiers. The Ewoks can even be thought of as being the childish equivalent to the rebels who they team up with. The spaceship flight sequences of the rebels going in for the ambush, but get themselves trapped by their enemy and they have to fight them off. It's essentially the same situation as the one on Endor, with the Ewoks doing a lot of the fighting, and both conflicts end with the target Empire structure exploding. The only distinction between the conflict the rebels face in outer space and the one the Ewoks fight on Endor is the scale of the conflicts. Here, the rebels cheer in the same way that Ewoks do. Another nice parallel between the Ewoks and the rebels is what we would loosely call the multiracial diversity among themselves. The Ewoks have a lot of unique visual variations within their species at the genetic level, and some are very well distinguished, emphasising their individuality. This is quite new to the Star Wars series, being that a lot of the aliens of the previous movies, and in this one, we either only ever see one of a kind, or if there are multiple characters of the same alien race, like the pig gods at Jabba's palace, they tend to look the same as each other, clones if you will. The same is also true with the Jawas, who may have some of the exact same vocal sounds as the Ewoks. But they all look the same, and we can't tell what they really look like without their hoods. The visually diverse nature of the Ewok species parallels the diversity of ethnicity and race among the rebels. Additionally, in the earlier conceptual sketches for the Rebel Fleet, or Rebel Base, this location is set on a very natural-looking planet, and this conceptual sketch features cylindrical structures to the tall Rebel Base. Quite reminiscent of that of the Ewoks' village, consisting of building structures built into tall trees. Something else about the Ewoks with their cutesy, kiddie nature, and this is something that people who don't like the Ewoks might not appreciate. The Ewoks, with their cutesy, warm, happy, and free-spirited nature, they go against the Empire, whose rank-and-file army and their Emperor are very cold and impersonal, and the very old-looking Emperor does not value friendship at all.
I assure you, we are quite safe from your friends here.
Your overconfidence is your weakness.
Your faith in your friends is yours.
Like them or hate them for their kiddie behaviour, but the Ewoks are effectively the emotional opposition to the Empire because of their kiddie nature. Yet again, this is something that more mature-looking alternative creatures would not have provided. And George Lucas was all in for the cuddly, cutesy nature of the Ewoks. He even advised his conceptual designers, quote, "dare to be cute," end quote. Okay, so that is my theory, the Ewoks as the symbolic child soldiers in Return of the Jedi. Before I finish this short video, I will mention some other noteworthy points about the Ewoks. Return of the Jedi is this presentation of a natural primitive society battling and defeating their opponents who have greater advanced technology. It's good that the film gets in of how primitive means of combat doesn't work by itself. The Ewoks had to use their resources in more intelligent ways to defeat them. And they did use one of the Imperial walkers to their advantage. The tribalistic quality of the Ewoks also connotate native human tribes found across the world and throughout history. In fact, the hints of the Ewoks being savage quite cleverly tones down the cutesy nature of the Ewoks, but without being too scary for the kids. Here, we have what I assume to be an Ewok hunter, who brandishes tusks of his victims. He doesn't look cuddly, does he? But his headgear comically has the huge snout of his killed prey visible on his head, and he later gets stabbed by R2 for laughs. A little bit of a narrative gap here, by the way. Han gets hostile with the Ewoks, but Luke asks him and Chewie to give up their weapons, which they reluctantly do. And the very next scene shows them all, Han, Chewie, Luke, R2-D2, all being carried back to the village, tied up by the Ewoks. Now, how did Han and Chewie get tied up like this? Did the Ewoks ask them all to be tied up? I don't think Han and Chewie would have agreed to this. They would rather fight it out with the Ewoks, which could probably result in Chewbacca murdering a few Ewoks here. Something that would have solved that narrative gap would be if Han and Chewie were shot with sleeping darts. They would naturally fall asleep and get tied up, and Luke goes along with it. Something that simple along those lines could have been done. On the other hand, I haven't seen any complaints about that minor narrative issue, so the film has kind of got away with it over the years. The Ewoks prepare to roast our heroes alive. Now, if we had a gang of Wookiees preparing to roast Han and others alive to be eaten, or how about a tribe of the alien race from James Cameron's Avatar trying to roast the characters, the kids in the audience might probably find them too scary to identify with. But a gang of teddy bear-like Ewoks trying to roast Han alive, who makes funny sarcastic comments of his own.
Somehow I got the feeling that didn't help us very much.
That is more palatable for the kids. It communicates the savagery of the wilderness in a fun way for the kids. And last observation I have on the Ewoks. In this scene of C-3PO recalling to his mostly Ewok audiences the events of the previous films, I couldn't help but think that this scene indirectly cast the Ewoks as being like us, the audience, who already saw the earlier movies. We see Ewoks of different ages, from the very young to the old, encompassing the wide age range similar to that of Star Wars' own audience. It's another way that Return of the Jedi makes the Ewoks more relatable to us, especially for kids. But short of this Ewok holding its baby can be taken as being like a mother with a kid in a cinema audience, but I also suspect it could also be a subtle parallel of kids who go to cinemas with their own teddy bears or soft toys. When I was younger, I used to go to cinemas with teddies I had, like Piglet from Winnie the Pooh. And if there is something that we the audience share with the Ewoks, then it's that we do cheer on for the heroes on screen just like the Ewoks do. Alright, so that is my case of defense for the Ewoks in Return of the Jedi. These characters are not there to please the critics and snobbish fans of a franchise. The Ewoks are there to entertain family audiences and serve their thematic purposes in this story. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video and I hope it makes you appreciate the Ewoks more. I've got another video on the way in the near future, which will be about how Han Solo and Princess Leia could have been better in this movie. If you're interested in seeing that video when I upload it, then subscribe so you don't miss it, and go check out my other videos as well. I also do other videos on other movies as well, nothing to do with Star Wars. Thanks for watching, may the Force be with you.